Thank you, Susan. Good afternoon or good morning if you're joining from a different part of the country. My name is Sarah Barzi, and I'm a Senior Director of State Education Services at WestEd, and along with Susan, serve as a co-lead on the Regional Education Laboratory Northeastern Islands Teacher Preparation Research Alliance, and as she mentioned, serve as Director of the Region 2 Comprehensive Center. The RELNI and the Region 2 CC are co-hosts for today's session titled Increasing the Diversity of the Educator Workforce, a Data-Driven Approach for Districts. We are pleased that you are here with us today to hear about Connecticut's commitment to increasing the diversity of its educator workforce and the progress they have made toward this incredibly important goal over the past few years. Following a brief introduction to the federally funded centers, you will hear from my colleagues at the REL Northeastern Islands and the Region 2 CC, as well as from Connecticut's Chief Talent Officer about the background, the state context, and the goals that set the stage for the work currently being done with the REL Northeastern Islands and the Region 2 CC to advance Connecticut's goals to increase the diversity of its educator workforce. Following the first part of today's session, we will pause to provide an opportunity for questions. In the second half of this session, you will have an opportunity to hear from a panel of representatives from Connecticut schools and districts facilitated by Dr. Regina Hopkins from the Connecticut State Department of Education, followed again by a facilitated Q&A. Finally, we'll wrap up for the day, and we ask that you please take the time to provide your feedback via the session evaluation.
You have been muted. Your microphone has been turned on.
We value your feedback as it does inform our work and it supports our continuous improvement goals to ensure that these sessions are responsive to and meeting your needs. So let's look at who we are. Susan briefly introduced, and I'll reintroduce the REL Northeastern Islands. The REL Northeastern Islands, or RELNI, is one of 10 regional education laboratories located across the country and funded to work in partnership with educators and policymakers to develop and use research that improves academic outcomes for students. You will note several of the services that are provided through the REL, and today's session is an excellent example of the last bullet, the design and delivery of technical assistance focused on the use of data and research. The Region 2 Comprehensive Center is one of 19 regional comprehensive centers and one national center that comprise the CC network, funded by the U.S. Department of Education to provide capacity building technical assistance and other support to state education agencies. The Region 2 CC supports the state education agencies in Connecticut, New York, and Rhode Island. The project you will hear about today represents a multi-year collaboration between the RELNI at the Region 2 CC and the Connecticut State Department of Education. So what can you expect from today's session? By the end of today's session, our goal is that you will have learned about Connecticut's approach to developing state policies and practices that are designed to support school districts in their work to recruit and hire educators of color. You will also hear about how Connecticut has used research to guide their work, as well as how the RELNI and Region 2 CC have guided the department in using demographic data to uncover inequities that exist in current hiring and selection processes, as well as in the retention rates for educators of color in the state. Finally, the team will introduce you to some of the resources that they have used over the course of the past several years in facilitating work with several Connecticut districts. And at this time, it is my great pleasure to introduce today's presenters, my colleagues. Let's start in the upper left. You heard Susan mention Dr. Saroja Warner. Dr. Warner is Director of Talent Development and Diversity at WestEd and is also on the staff of the Region 2 Comprehensive Center, where she serves as the lead on this project in Connecticut. She's joined by Dr. Meg Caven, a Senior Research Associate at EDC on the staff of the Regional Education Laboratory Northeastern Islands, and she serves as the RELNI lead on this project. And finally, Dr. Shwana Tucker serves as the Chief Talent Officer at the Connecticut State Department of Education, and in this role is leading this work for the department in collaboration with Drs. Warner, Cavan, and members of the project teams at the REL Northeastern Islands and Region 2 Comprehensive Center. So without further delay, it is my pleasure to turn this over to Dr. Warner and the team to get us started. Saroja.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you very much for that. I'm looking at the slide and listening to you introduce us and thinking to myself, how many doctors does it take to increase educator diversity in Connecticut? The reality is it takes a whole lot, as well as a whole lot of people that haven't had the privilege to go through that type of training, but nonetheless are just as important and probably even more expert in this work. So I just want to recognize that and call that out. I want to give greetings to everyone and thank you for, choosing to spend your time on this webinar. You have a lot of options for how you spend your time, and I appreciate that you made the decision today to join us today. So I hope that this will be helpful as my colleagues and I share about what we think is pretty exciting and certainly impactful work that we've been doing in Connecticut in partnership across our organizations, in collaboration with the Connecticut Department of Education, and in particular with the school district teams that we've been working with. I want to start by telling you a little bit about me and my story. This picture that you're looking at is actually my first grade class picture. And if you are interested in zooming in on your screens, I'd be interested to know if folks, throw it in the chat, you can find me in there. What am I wearing? But this is my first grade class picture with my first grade teacher, Mrs. Kiles, who was the only Black teacher, for that matter, teacher of color I had in my K-12 experience growing up in Maryland. This work to increase educator diversity is critical for advancing racial equity, but it's also very personal to me. If you had asked me at age 6 what made Mrs. Kiles a good teacher to me, I would have likely said things like how kind she was and how nice she was. But myself at this age, knowing what I know, can actually articulate my reflections about Mrs. Kiles a little differently, about why she was so tremendously important in my life. And that includes that Mrs. Kiles was a culturally responsive teacher. And she was a culturally responsive teacher who provided me with windows and mirrors, the mirror representing that story, reflecting my own culture, and helped me to build my own identity, and the window that offered me a view into someone else's experience. Research demonstrates that educator diversity and teacher diversity in particular matter. While most students in our schools now are children of color, this is not the case among teachers and principals. And despite the fundamental value of a racially diverse teacher workforce, there exists a vast diversity gap between teachers and students. In America, 50% of our students identify as being a person of color, compared to only 20% of their teachers, and with only 2% of those being Black men. The underrepresentation of teachers of color is particularly egregious in certain locales. So, for example, in 17 states, more than 95% of teachers are white, compared to an average of 82% of students being white in those states. Indeed, 40% of public schools do not have a single teacher of color. Research demonstrates that teachers of color serve as role models. So don't just take my word for granted, right? It's not just an anecdote about my experience. We have research. We've talked to students. We've talked to adults who were once students, and we've come to appreciate in the research the important role that teachers of color serve as role models, particularly for students of color, but for all students, that teachers of color set high expectations and support the academic growth of students of color, that students of color are less likely to be disciplined or expelled by teachers of color when they are typically disciplined at disproportionately higher rates, and they are more likely to be identified for gifted programs when they are disproportionately under-identified today. So research shows that all students benefit from having a diverse group of teachers that come from this variety of backgrounds as they prepare to enter our increasingly global society. Regular exposure to and interactions with individuals from a variety of races and ethnic groups, especially during childhood, can help to combat stereotypes, can strengthen students' abilities to become comfortable with their peers from different backgrounds, reduce unconscious implicit biases inside and outside the classroom, and lead to innovative and greater social cohesion. I would encourage everyone to take a second and think about the last time, I know it's been a while with the pandemic, but the last time you invited people over to your home for a dinner party or any sort of activity at your home, a social. Think about who those people are. Think about if you were going to do something this summer and who those people would be on your guest list. And once you've written those names down, I'd encourage you to flesh out the identities of those folks and would encourage you to reflect on how diverse that group of people are. This goes to the core of part of why educator diversity matters so much for our children in schools today, because they'll grow up to be us, to be the adults. And if they don't have opportunities to not just embrace cultural diversity, but also meet folks and be comfortable creating friendships and relationships with people across cultures, across race, as young people, it becomes increasingly harder for them as adults. And I think many of us can probably attest to that. So all that said, I want to pass the mic to my good colleague, Dr. Shawana Tucker, who is leading this effort from the Connecticut State Department of Education to support increasing educator diversity. Dr. Tucker is going to talk a little bit next about the current context for the work across the state. Dr. Tucker?
Thank you so much, Dr. Warner, and I appreciate the opportunity to share the work that we're doing here in Connecticut. So in 2008, 35.5% of the student population were students of color. And in 2019-2020, the percentage of students of color has risen to nearly 47%. While the diversity of Connecticut's educators is on the rise, it has not kept pace with the diversity of the student population, thus the gap continues to widen. In 2016, the State Board of Education implemented a 5-year comprehensive plan ensuring excellence for all Connecticut students. The plan issues promises to our educators, our students, and their families by creating opportunities within each of the CSDE's offices to become intentionally focused on an identified priority goal. So for the Talent Office, that goal is to recruit, support, and retain great teachers and leaders with a specific focus on increasing racial, ethnic, and linguistic diversity. Our problems to solve as a collective are as follows. Build bridges to attract and retain top talents to serve in Connecticut schools and districts. Use recruitment, the educator evaluation and support system, and professional learning practices to develop and enhance the talent pipeline of diverse, highly effective educators. Provide culturally responsive instruction through a deliberate focus on the instructional skills and wisdom required to meet the individual needs of students. Transform educator preparation programs. And finally, recruit, develop, and retain highly effective school principals through high-quality pre-service training, induction programs, and continuous development opportunities. The Connecticut State Department of Education has committed to addressing this gap by setting an ambitious goal with a call to action for the CSDE, districts, and other educational partners to strategically design and implement recruitment and retention plans that will help to collectively achieve this goal. In 2019, the governor signed legislation, Public Act number 18-34, requiring that the state hire 250 new educators of color, 30% of whom are men each year, and districts produce a written plan for increasing the diversity of their educator workforce. To support districts in achieving these goals, the state developed a guidebook that includes case studies and tools that guide districts in the process of using data to understand the challenges they face related to hiring a diverse educator workforce. We have partnered with the REL and the R2CC to develop training and coaching materials that support districts in using the tools in the guidebook. I'm going to hand it over to Meg Caven and Saroja to describe their coaching efforts with our districts.
Thank you so much, Shawana. I'm going to talk now about a little bit of work that the REL and the Comprehensive Center have been doing together to prepare districts to diversify their educator workforce. Sorry, I've lost my slide. There we go. The coaching series involving 8 pilot districts began in the fall of 2019. And we plan to engage these districts in 5 coaching sessions. Our second session was planned for, you guessed it, March of 2020. And when the pandemic hit, we had to reorganize our plan, conducting 3 sessions with each of 5 districts who continued the work through what we know were very challenging times. This fall, we reanimated our coaching series, adding 3 new districts, catching up the 3 districts from the first cohort, and bringing everyone together for what has now been 4 of 5 coaching sessions related to increasing the diversity of the educator workforce across Connecticut. Some of these sessions have been whole group gatherings with time for district teams to workshop their ideas in communities of practice. Other sessions have been coaching calls with individual districts. The 5th and final session, which is upcoming next week, will set districts up to draft their own action plans for recruiting teachers of color and retaining them. The first phase of this work focuses on using data to understand and define the district's challenges related to recruiting educators of color. Using tools from Connecticut's guidebook, districts ask questions like, what are the racial demographics of our educators? And how does this look different at different levels of certification or administration and across different types of positions? How do the demographics of school leadership compare to the demographics of teachers? What proportion of educators of color who passed initial screening were interviewed for positions? And what proportion of those interviewed were offered a role? In some instances, what we found is that these questions revealed as much about the data collection needs of districts as they did about the district's hiring funnel itself. So in particular, we found that districts don't always or even often collect data on their applicant pool, and some even pose the question of whether asking about applicants' demographics was legal. I'm going to pass the mic back to Saroja Warner to describe the next phase of our coaching work in Connecticut.
Thanks, Meg. So the second phase, and Meg alluded to this, was part of the project. We also did coaching with individual teams. So again, managing through a pandemic and having to move a lot of what we would have done in person to a virtual format, we did get creative with the technologies and were able to create opportunities for this network of districts that we worked with to meet in synchronous ways together, but then also asynchronously and then individually do some team consultancies. And so we thought it made sense that the root cause analysis happen in a consultancy with individual districts, and that's essentially what phase 2 started off with, sort of as districts were collecting the data, helping them to think through the root causes of the challenges that they were surfacing and that were showing up in the data, as well as then taking the analysis to inform the development of their vision, theory of action, and then subsequent SMART goals. And that's work that we are in now. So I can't talk about that as if we've already done it. We're actually in the midst of part 2 of phase 2, the visioning, the developing a clear theory of action, and then creating a plan that has not only goals, but a set of comprehensive and cohesive goals aligned to that theory of action and vision with the accompanying strategies. And so that is, as we move into phase 3 of this project, that we are rapidly moving into, working with the district teams to identify strategies, evidence and research-based, that are aligned with their theory of action. The goal of this coaching project, in addition to building the capacity of districts to be able to do this work well, is also to support their learning and to generate from this pilot group a number of examples of what a draft increasing educator diversity plan could look like to continue to inform the work, not just in districts, I think, in Connecticut, but across the nation, because we know that this is a critical priority across the nation for school districts in the service of advancing equity for our students. And so our hope is that starting with this coaching project, we start to generate a lot of lessons learned, both about the process for creating a plan, as well as the process for supporting the learning of district teams who want to be able to do this work well. So lots of learning happening through this project. It's been a really exciting effort, particularly given the commitment at the state level and the commitment and willingness at the district level to work collaboratively.
Before we move on from the coaching series, I just wanted to talk briefly about a sort of parallel piece of work that we have undertaken in Connecticut. As your resident data wonk, I wanted to raise the profile of this initiative, which is to construct a dashboard that allows tracking of various aspects of the racial demographics of the educator workforce, and particularly how students' experiences and exposure to teachers of color varies across district and across schools within a district. This goes all the way back to the research that tells us that students and students of color in particular benefit from exposure to teachers of color. And so as we expand the number of teachers of color in the workforce, it really matters where those teachers are assigned, right? Do they teach only in the most affluent districts that have the lowest prevalence of students of color? Do they only teach in high schools such that elementary school students are nearly a decade into schooling before they encounter a teacher who looks like them? And so this piece of the project to construct a dashboard that tracks not only districts' hiring of teachers of color, but student-level exposure to teachers of color by student demographics is we think, a really important piece, and really at the forefront of some of these initiatives as we continue to push them forward. We're hopeful that this tool will be useful to the state, to districts, and to schools to track how and whether students have exposure to teachers of color throughout their educational careers. Now, this is a moment where we have planned to pause in the program and invite your questions and take a minute to talk a little bit more about the work that we have been doing in Connecticut before we have a chance to hear directly from the presenters.
So Meg, this is Sarah, and I'll jump in because I'm seeing two themes that are surfacing in the participant chat. So let's start with the first. Earlier in the presentation, we heard Dr. Tucker reference the Connecticut General Assembly's bill, Public Act 1834, which required Connecticut to focus on hiring and achieving the goal of hiring 250 new educators of color, 30% representing males. And in the chat, I'm seeing a couple of folks just addressing the question of particularly pre-service and how is it that we inspire students of color to enter the education profession, and folks just wondering what strategies Connecticut took to do that. And then I think I'll ask the second because I think they're interrelated, and that is Stephen raises the question of how did Connecticut address the ability to, I'll use the word target, or focus on that goal and not feel as if it was, in his words, quote, discriminating against white educators to set such a goal. So if you or Saroja or Shwana could answer those, I think they're interrelated.
I also think this would be a great question to have. We're about to move into this panel conversation shortly. Shwana, I think it would be great if you wanted to open up the conversation, and then we could also have our panelists talk a little bit more.
Yes, that's fine. I agree. And I could not hear all of what Sarah was saying. I only heard part of the question. But what I will say is that the State Board of Education and our legislature realized that the demographics of Connecticut were changing, and they were changing rapidly, and that it was time for us to address and adapt to the changes, especially within our student population. And when looking at our numbers and our graduating pool from our EPPs, vast differences. And so there was definitely the need and the belief that this had to be addressed. And so diversification of the educator pipeline in Connecticut has various facets and components. And this has been one way through 18-34 that we've been able to address that. And not to vary off, but we do have other initiatives that we have put forth. So we really are addressing it from I would say a middle school level on up now, which is very, very important. And I'm very proud and pleased to say that of the goal that was established 5 years ago, which was a 10% goal established by the State Board of Education to hire educators of color, we have reached that 10%. And so while we are very proud that we've reached the 10%, we're not resting on our laurels. There is still much work to be done, and we continue to do that work. $15 and 20%. So I think that's kind of like the foundation of where we are, and I think the panel can also add more to that from a district perspective.
Dr. Tucker, I see another, and again, I'll defer to the presenters whether you want to defer to the panel, but I believe this is in your area. There is a question about traditional versus alternative programs and what you are seeing in Connecticut with respect to which of those programs, if you have that data, are producing more educators of color or teachers of color. And then there is a question about the essential elements of a residency program, which is a little bit deeper probably, but just a question posed by Doris.
Sure. What we're seeing when we look at the data and the numbers of graduates from our ARC programs and from our traditional programs when it comes to diversity, definitely our ARC programs are graduating more students of color. We have seen actually two programs that have graduated upwards of 100 students, with 75% of those students being students of color.
That's fabulous. Thank you. And then another question, which is probably less about teacher prep and how you're preparing the next generation of teachers. A question from Karen around Connecticut's recruitment efforts, and would you say they're more focused locally, or is Connecticut expanding to a more national recruitment effort and strategies?
I would say currently we're doing a little bit of both. But within the past year, especially within a pandemic year, we did not honestly do a lot of external recruitment. We really focused more internally. We did begin two new initiatives. One is Ed Rising, which is a grow your own model, which we have adopted as a statewide model here in Connecticut that is proving to be very beneficial. The way that it is structured, it's very easy for schools to implement, and we started off at the high school level We do want to push down to the middle school grades, but we've started at high school. We have partnered with and worked with 14 districts, and we have other districts that are coming on board now that we are returning to in-person learning for the fall semester. And prior to that, we had one district in Connecticut that had Ed Rising and utilized the curriculum and the components and integrated it into their course curriculum. And we have had graduates graduate from that district that have transitioned right into EPP programs. I'd also like to say, as a part of this initiative, we've partnered with our universities that have EPP programs, so we are aligned. We offer dual credit courses, and we want our students to have a smooth transition from high school into an EPP program at one of our universities. And so we're even making that stronger. We're going to host professional development free this summer for our administrators and for our teacher leaders, and we're going full speed ahead now that we are post-pandemic and returning to some normalcy for this school year. And we're also going to expand our dual credit course offerings at the university level for our students that are in the program. We are going to focus this coming year on 2 new strands within Ed Rising and recruiting students to exposure of the educator pipeline and this as a profession. And that is going to be the Male Educator Network MEN program, where we're now going to turn our attention to trying to recruit more males to our Ed Rising programs within our high schools. And also another strand that will focus on our EL students and really spending time with them and sharing more of what the profession has to offer. So we've got like a laundry list of what we're going to do and how we're going to approach that with male mentors, with parents, other incentives that we want to offer. But that's going to be our focus moving forward, because when we look at the data and we look at the numbers of especially minority males that are entering the education profession, it is it's staggering. It's like 2%. And so we know that that's an area that we must address. So that's going to be the focus moving forward. We also have some college programs that we have implemented for our students that are already in EPP programs. That would be our Next Generation program, which really exposes our students sooner rather than later to experiential learning within districts, and they are paid. It is a clinical experience, and due to many of the staffing shortages that our districts face this year, we were able to pilot this program in Bristol Public Schools starting in November when we launched the program with 20 students from Central Connecticut State. And those students work 2.5 days per week within the district. And they were really able to assist the district with not only staffing, but provide them the needed resources that they needed to assist with teaching and learning at the district level. They have an anchor teacher that's assigned to them that they work very closely with. And the university also offered flexibility in their school schedule. So it's been a great opportunity for our students. From that one pilot site, we now have students that have been working in 6 districts within the state, and the demand is growing. We now have districts that have requested these students to work during the summer to assist with summer learning loss as well as for next school year, because they see the value of having someone there who is enrolled in an EPP program, them gaining experience, and the students are also assigned mentors from 2 of our organizations that serve minority populations here within the state. That would be Black for our administrative consortium as well as CALIS. So I'll stop there and see if they have any other questions.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Tucker. That was excellent overview of so much great work. I'm going to circle back to another question that I think we didn't dig deep enough on, but I'm looking at the participants, and I know that there's at least a few representatives from whether local or perhaps even state school boards associations. And so I wanted to circle back to Stephen's question around, so Connecticut has set targets and milestones toward that target, first the 10%, and I think you cut out, but I think you went to your next goal, like 16, 20%. And so in order to do that, you are having to set some targets and milestones and hold yourselves accountable to that. And in doing so, and in targeting an intense effort to increase educators of color, Stephen used the word discriminating. And so we all know we need school boards in collaboration with the administrators and folks that we're going to hear from. Anything you can say to address really just the cultural change and how we are able to collaborate and ensure that our school boards understand the goals and are working alongside the school and district folks who are working in this direction?
Sure. And I'll just start off by saying the one thing that we would not do is to discriminate against anyone. So all of the initiatives and the programs that we host and encourage our districts to participate are open to everyone. But I do think that it is through a cultural lens, and I believe that it starts at the top with leadership. One must really understand the benefit of having persons from diverse backgrounds and diverse experiences to teach students, all, not just students of color. So it's a two-way street for the students as well as for the teachers and administrators that are working with our students. So everyone benefits when they are open to diversity. Now, has everyone been open to this? No, they have not, which then means you have to spend time on work such as the work that we're doing today with this webinar, the work that we've done with the REL, and other work that we're doing to really educate those as to why there is a need for this and why it is critical that we expand our thinking and what does the research and the data show as to why we need to be culturally responsive and how our students and our staff and our districts can benefit from that work.
Thanks, Dr. Tucker. I'm going to pose this one to, I think, Dr. Cavan. Dr. Cavan, there's a couple of references, and I think they ping off of Dr. Tucker's reference to the dashboard that's being developed in Connecticut. And so Sarah poses a question that, in her experience, it's easy for dashboards to end up sitting on a shelf after initial excitement. What kinds of systems do you envision putting into place to ensure that the dashboard is consistently being used to drive changes in practice? So I think, Dr. Tucker, you're welcome to, but also Dr. Cavan, if you had any thoughts on that, would love to hear that from you as well.
Sure. Thank you so much, and thank you so much, Sarah, for your question. I think we're in a really sensitive moment with the dashboard in particular, because we are attentive to the fact that some districts are at the very beginning of doing this work, and we are reticent to construct something for them that feels like an accountability measure, because we really hope for this to be like a continuous improvement and a learning tool, at least at the outset, right? So in terms of thinking about what are the systems and structures we put in place to ensure that the dashboard's consistently being used, I think we're almost not quite there yet. We've had great conversations with practitioners, and many of our panelists were in some of those conversations about what are the things, like what are the ways in which this would be useful to you, and we're hoping that those conversations about the utility of the dashboard, some of the trade-offs associated with the dashboard, right? Like what are the unintended consequences of having these data available, and to whom will they be available, are very much like at the front of our minds as we're moving this work forward. To our knowledge, there isn't such a tool out there, at least in the districts or the states with which we have partnered, and so we're very much learning as we go, but are thoughtful about many of the questions that you raise.
Thanks, Meg. I'm going to pivot back to a question. Dr. Warner, I think it'd be great to hear from you on this, and certainly welcome Dr. Cavan and Dr. Tucker to jump in. But a couple of questions are around the role of culturally responsive practice in schools, and specifically as it relates to recruiting the next generation of potential educators of color into the field. So what is Connecticut doing? And Dr. Werner, I know I hear you speak about this often, so how is it that we're addressing the importance of culturally responsive practice and how that might change for students who are potentially pre-pipeline and considering careers and resulting from their experiences in school. So Dr. Werner, can I kick it off to you?
Sure. It's hard for me to represent what Connecticut is doing. What I can say generally is that in the work to increase educator diversity and leveraging Grow Your Own programs as a key strategy in that effort, we do have to address what's happening in schools that impacts our students and our students of color potentially who, will then potentially make a decision not to pursue a career in teaching, right? And so if in the strategy to cultivate our future educators of color using our current pool of K-12 students, we're going to have to address like what's happening in schools and what's happening in schools in relation to culture and climate. And so I'll just sort of say that broadly. I know we're running short on time in this segment. I'd be curious if, Shawana, if you wanted to say anything about that.
Sure. I would say in a recent focus group that was held with male educators, that was one of the items that we did discuss. And it was really on what is happening now in the world around us and how do we then really make this a profession that males and students of color would really want to enter. And one of the main things that came from that discussion was the importance of the role model, the mentor, and having a clear understanding of how also social justice plays into the role of being an educator. And that is a critical piece that we're really seeing through some of our survey data with our students, that they want to affect change and they know that change needs to occur. And we're starting to see the data showing us that many of them are seeing that through education or by becoming an educator is a way that they can affect change within their own local communities. And so I think we're at a very ripe opportunity for districts, especially in light of everything that has occurred and is still going on in our society, to really tap into that and really look at some of the courses that they are offering to students around social justice, around change, around cultural sensitivity, cultural competency, that can really help to benefit them, as well as some of those courses that can be offered to our students, not just the students, but to our teachers as well, because there are many out there who would welcome that. And I've seen it happen in districts when time is spent and professional development is offered to administrators and to lead teachers in the area. Tremendous growth can occur. And I think that is what we need now looking forward.
Thanks so much, Dr. Werner and Dr. Tucker. And I think we are at time, so I am going to turn it back over, I believe, to Dr. Hopkins for our second part of the session.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I am pleased to be with you all and really thrilled to that we're going to hear from 4 of the leaders in Connecticut's efforts to increase educator diversity. And I will briefly introduce them. We're going to start with Kimberly Schulte, who is the Director of Human Services for Torrington Public Schools. We are also joined by Jessica Ocasio, who is the Talent and Professional Development Supervisor for Waterbury Public Schools. We have with us on the phone, unfortunately Jamal is having some challenges with his video, but nevertheless, he is here with us. Jamal Davis, who is principal of the West Side Middle School in Groton, representing Groton Public Schools. And last but not least is Colin McNamara, who is the Assistant Superintendent for South Windsor's Public Schools. Thank you all for joining us. We are excited to hear what you have been doing and to hear from you about what is happening in your district. And we're going to begin with the first question, which is, what have been the successes, the challenges, and early lessons learned as your district teams have begun the work to increase the diversity of the educator workforce in Connecticut?
So good afternoon, everyone. Again, I'm Colin McNamara. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Personnel and Administration in South Windsor Public Schools. We are a average-size suburban school district just outside of Hartford, Connecticut. I'll kick us off and just say it's a pleasure to be here today. I'll start with the first part of that question, and where you ask about the successes. We are very pleased with the progress that we have made. It doesn't mean that we are like Dr. Tucker was saying, progress doesn't mean that we know we don't need to do more work, but we have been successful in diversifying our educator workforce over the past 5 years. We've gone from 3.4% teachers of color in South Windsor to 7% in our current school year, with a total staff of 425 students, or I'm sorry, 425 certified educators. It's not enough. We know we need to do more. South Windsor is actually the fastest growing K-12 district in the state of Connecticut, and we are growing more and more diverse. And so we've got a long way to go to make progress in that area. Challenges that we're facing, obviously, is we know that there is more work to be done. I mentioned that earlier. We continue to be very pointed and direct in our efforts to diversify our educator workforce. And I'd say one of the biggest challenges is my friends and colleagues who are on this panel with me, is we're oftentimes vying for the same candidates. You know, Kim down in Torrington has openings. I have openings up here in South Windsor. Or Jamal might have openings in Groton. And, you know, oftentimes we are looking at the same candidates. And so, you know, we are, it's a small state, and oftentimes it's because of the fact that our state is small. Candidates are willing to travel, and so we're often, again, vying for those same candidates. When I think about the early lessons that we've learned, the thing that I often say about the work that we are doing and the success, at least, that we've had to this point in South Windsor, is very simple. Intentionality is key. Intentionality is something that we are very deliberate and specific in our goals to diversify our educator workforce. We discuss the importance of this with our administrative group. We discuss this with our teachers and support staff. People know that it is a goal in our district, and that is something that is critical to do the work. Some other early lessons that we've learned is that obviously district leadership has to make this goal a priority. Without having district leadership prioritizing the work will not be as successful. It's very, very simple. Our superintendent has made this a priority, and our central office leadership team has made this a priority. And to that point, one of the things that we think is important and know is critically important is we need to get our Board of Education to support the work as well. And that's been a critical component to it. We've brought in guest speakers and guest presenters to talk about this work with our Board of Education. We've had agenda items at our Board of Education meeting where we have highlighted the efforts that we take in South Windsor to diversify our workforce. And we go over the numbers, and we talk about about what we're doing and what we still need to do to improve and grow in that area. And we are fortunate in South Windsor that we have an extremely cohesive Board of Education who is incredibly supportive of this work. We support diversity, they support our efforts to diversify our workforce. We embrace the diversity of the South Windsor community and the growing diversity of the South Windsor community, and that's been critically important for us. So I'll stop there because I know I have colleagues that also are going to be speaking to this as well.
Thank you so much, Colin.
And just piggybacking off of what Colin said, yes, we're all trying to compete for the same candidates in our small state. So that led our district here in Waterbury to try to, expand our horizons, really thinking outside of the box, really taking a look at our accountability measures when it comes to the hiring practices and processes that we have in place, making sure that we have that inclusive messaging in recruitment. But again, one of the challenges that we face is we are a large urban district, and unfortunately our pay is not as competitive as others. So working with our superintendent and working with our Board of Education, seeing if we can try to create various incentives to bring into our district to try to really get people to want to come to our district, seeing what we have to offer besides being a great district full of great students and teachers, but what else can we offer to future teachers of color in our district? The biggest lesson that we learned is because we are a small state, because we are competing with several other districts for candidates, was looking at that Grow Your Own initiative. We really are taking advantage of the Grow Your Own programs within our district, from creating partnerships with the Relay Graduate School for School of Education, allowing our non-certified support staff or non-certified staff members to be able to participate in the Relay program, providing them some type of tuition support while keeping their position and their benefits in place as well. So that has been one of our greatest factors for our district to try to really increase our number of teachers of colors in our district. As Dr. Tucker mentioned, the alternate route certification programs are producing more teachers of color than the traditional route. So we're going to try to build off of that knowledge, that data, to try to get some more of our people that are already working with us, people that are already working with our children, that know our district, that know how our district operates, getting them into the actual teaching profession. And we have great members of our staffing community right now that are interested in doing that, but at one point or another, as we all know, the financial burden of trying to complete a degree, a master's degree, can have affected their ability to actually reach that goal of becoming a certified teacher. So our district is really working and striving to making sure that we're providing as much support, trying to be creative with how we can really grow our staff within our district to become potential teachers in our district. Dr. Tucker also mentioned the Educator Rising program. So tapping into our high schools, making sure that we're providing the opportunity besides just having young educator societies or future educator societies, but having a strongly embedded curriculum such as Educator Rising to really get our students who are interested in becoming future leaders, future teachers, getting them that experience as early as possible in the high school level. And we're proud to say that we have been offering that to our students, and we have about 300 high school students right now that are enrolled in the program. And the goal is to have them complete, those field experiences right here in our own schools, in our own district, so that way they can really build those skills, those experiences, and the desire to be a teacher back here in the town that they grew up in, that they get their education in, and hopefully come back to be a teacher in our district.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Kim or Jamal?
Yeah, sure, I'll step in. So I'm Kim. I'm the Director of Human Resources from Torrington Public Schools in Litchfield County. And one of our greatest successes is that we really learned as we worked through the self-assessments that were in the appendices of that guidebook through the coaching sessions, that we learned that we really had to look at our profile and how welcoming we were for diverse applicants. So we really engaged in a journey to do some deep cultural work within the district and really kind of rebranding our district and how we looked to our applicant pool. So one of our greatest successes has been the formation of our equity committee, where we really brought in stakeholders from all various groups, from our community, from our parents, students we have. So we're looking at everyone and hearing those voices, and we have board members that are involved, and we've really been able to create a diversity statement and a vision that really speaks to what we want Torrington to be. So that so far has been one of our greatest successes, and we've seen that we've produced some results so far for this hiring season that we're seeing about a 1.5% increase in our applicants of color. So I think that we're starting to move that needle, and we're really excited about that. Challenges, I think, kind of relate to one of the questions that one of the participants had asked, which is about, when you have resistance to this work, and we have some people that kind of, are asking those questions about, discrimination on the other side, and how do you, address the reverse discrimination kind of perception. And we've really looked at ways that we can educate our board members. We've had some board members that just don't understand this work, and we've really had to engage in a lot of deep education to really explain that we're looking to increase our pool of highly qualified educators, and that we really want to make sure that we have the highest quality of educators in front of all of our students. And we're not looking to sacrifice that. We're just looking to have teachers of color who look like our student population, because we know there's evidence and data to support that work. So really doing a lot of, similar to what Colin mentioned, bringing in, speakers to really educate our staff on all of that, and educate our board members, and educate our parents, and really help and listening to everyone. So that's been a way that we've addressed that challenge. And then lessons learned, when I look at the lessons learned, one of the first things that we did when we engaged in the coaching sessions was, as we worked through those self-assessments, we really found that our perceptions were very different depending on the level for the people that were on our team in the coaching session. And so where I thought we might have not been doing something well, other people thought we were doing it well, and we really had to look at that evidence. So I think as we looked at widening that out to our whole school population, we really were able to educate people that while they thought we were really welcoming, that maybe we weren't in all those aspects. And we're really having conversations that weren't being had a year ago. And that's really helping change the culture in our district so that we can then engage in other initiatives. Similar to what Jessica said, we're working with Ed Rising now, so we're able to get buy-in from all of our stakeholders, staff, board members, parents, community members, to really kind of start to implement all of these other strategies to help us move the work forward.
Thank you, Kim. So Jamal, as a building principal, can you share your perceptions and your talk a little bit about your efforts in Groton?
Absolutely, thank you. I just want to provide some clarification. I am the assistant principal at Groton Middle School, but I'm also the chair of our district DEI Committee, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. I would say for Groton, based on what Colin and Kimberly stated, we are following a similar pathway. So that pathway begins with leadership, and so we've spent a lot of time with our leadership, central leadership, Board of Education, and school administration, really to understand and value the importance of diversifying our workforce. And so we spent a lot of time looking at the data to really demonstrate the disproportionality that exists between our student population. And so to give you a little bit of background, Groton is in southeastern Connecticut. We're about 15 miles away from Rhode Island. We're on I-95. We have a very diverse community where we have a very large affluent community, but we also have a community of students and families that are low socioeconomic. And so what we see there in our population is about 50% of our population would fall into students of color. And then we also have a very large percent in terms of the district of free and reduced lunch, so probably about 35%. So we are a very diverse community. The success that I say we've been able to have is that we have received tremendous support and buy-in from all levels. The board has committed to it. We have established a DI committee, again, in which I chair, which has kind of taken the lead in hiring, but also other areas such as teaching and learning, student voice, community interaction, just to name a few of the subcommittees that we've worked. So the success there is that we're creating some cohesion between our vision. We established a vision and mission statement, and what we are actually doing, our actionable steps. So I think that is probably the biggest success there. The challenges that we have, particularly to that of hiring, recruitment, hiring, and retention, is that we are a district about 4,000. We do not have a lot of turnover of staff at this point. Comparably to our region, our district plays fairly well. And I think as a result, one of the reasons we have a positive culture, we're not seeing a lot of turnover. So for us, and our goal is to hire about 1% of teachers of color each year. We just do not have the number of vacancies available. However, we have not allowed that to stop our efforts. So we have worked with our administration to look at our practices. Currently, our hiring practices are really centered within the schools themselves. And so as you can imagine, when you have the schools kind of taking the lead in terms of hiring for their particular school, there could be some discrepancies there. So we're trying to create a more equitable approach by creating more systems that we follow universally. So part of that has been the key to our lessons learned, that we really need to address systemic inequalities with systemic practices. And so that's what we have done at Groton, and we are very pleased about our success. But as Colin was stating, we are far from achieving our ultimate goal. But the fact that we have members of our committee, for example, who have just committed to starting a book club centered on culturally responsive teaching. We are also looking to promote that as our professional development focus for this year as well. So again, that cohesion has created a comprehensive plan for us that we have set for a 5-year strategic plan.
Thank you, Jamal. Each of you has touched a bit already on the strategies that your teams have begun to implement at the local level, and you've identified some of the ways in which they are working and some of the things that you're working through. Can you talk a little bit more about that, about the strategies that you are implementing, and specifically the kinds of things that are needed to shift the district culture away from what it has been, which we know requires uncomfortable reflection and self-work related to racial bias and whiteness?
Yeah, I'll jump in, Regina, with that one. That was something that was I really wanted to tackle. Actually, something that we started to work on and discuss last year with our leadership team. I started doing a lot of research into implicit bias and reading about how implicit bias has such a significant, or can have such a significant impact on hiring decisions, whether it's in education, whether it's in business, whether it's in the medical profession, doesn't matter. And that was something that I really wanted to take head on here in South Windsor. So we actually brought some professional development into the district. This was something that was initially slated for April of 2020, and we all know what happened in the spring of 2020, so things didn't quite go as planned, but we were able to bring the training in just about 4 or 5 months ago into district on the impact of implicit bias in the hiring process, and we had somebody come in and do that professional development for our administrative team, who obviously facilitates the hiring process for individual schools or departments, and certainly which I have oversight over as the Assistant Superintendent for Personnel and Administration. It really went over very well with our administrative group. It was something that everybody was open to, and really opened up some very good, genuine conversations about this topic. And one of the things that we do in South Windsor is we don't make hiring decisions necessarily in a silo. We have teacher involvement, staff involvement in the interview process when we have committee interviews for different openings that we have. And we wanted to have teachers and staff that are involved in that interview process also have to go through this training. So we put a message out to our staff, and we said, if you want to be a member of a hiring committee, this is a training that you're going to have to go through. And we've designed and carried out a couple of trainings on that topic with staff in our district. And we are intending to do more of them. And it has been something that I think has been very well received, and we're going to continue to do work in that area. Book study groups, there's a lot of literature out there about the importance of teacher diversity in schools and educator diversity in schools, and having that be something that we're just routinely talking about. Again, it goes back to what I said before, which is that intentionality. I'll just hit a couple of other things. We're doing similar things that other school districts are doing. We did create a Director of Equity and Inclusion position, which is a high-level central office administrative position to really focus on equity and inclusion in both teacher recruitment and retention, but as well as curriculum and instruction. And really, it's been a very helpful to have that position, because as the assistant superintendent, hiring is one of the things that I do, but it's not the only thing that I do. And so even though my heart is and my head is in the work, I also have a myriad of other things, and having somebody really look at this with a very narrow lens has been very beneficial. We've established an equity council, and I know that that's something that, Jamal mentioned that he is running in Groton, and certainly that has been a benefit to us. It's getting our teachers and staff talking about the work, which is extremely beneficial, and there's a subcommittee that's focused on teacher hiring and retention. We're looking at our interview questions we're through an equity lens. We're asking our administrators to provide those to us so that we can look at them and provide them with feedback. One of the things it doesn't, I will tell you, it doesn't relate specifically to hiring, but one of the things that we have done is we added Diwali as a school holiday to our calendar, and we also changed the recognition of Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. That, as I said, it doesn't relate to hiring specifically, but I will tell you that one of the things that we've heard from people when we interview them for positions, and when they eventually reach my table and I'm interviewing them, is that I get a lot of feedback that people will say to us, when I see that districts are doing those types of things, I know that equity and inclusion and social justice are important in that district, and I know that that district embraces cultural diversity, and it's been something that has helped in our recruitment efforts. Just those little things that you don't think really relate to recruiting. We are starting to look at the data of our applicants and race ethnicity data of applicants. We are partnering with teacher alternative route to certification programs. We're not only partnering with the programs, but we are, to the extent that we're able right now, we're fully supporting financially people that are going into those programs because we recognize that, again, financial resources are tough. And it's interesting. I've started to look at my hiring practices for non-certified positions in a very different way. So I actually just hired a young woman the other day for a paraprofessional position in my school district. And while I was interviewing her for that position, I recognized that she might be a strong candidate for the alternative route to certification position, and I started to already talk to her about that as a possibility for something down the line, just to because I think it would be a good program for her to go through based off of what she's interested in doing. And another big thing is marketing. Our marketing strategies have changed. We are very clear and specific when we create postings. We talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion and social justice in those postings. It's critically important that when a potential applicant is looking at anything based on our school, we want them to know that that is a goal of ours and a priority of ours. So those are some more of the things maybe that we didn't touch upon, and I'll turn things over to my colleagues again.
Thank you so much. Jessica?
Yeah, Waterbury has done quite a few things as well in regards to recruitment, but also retention. We actually started a few years back working with STIR, the State Education Resource Center, where we created our district equity leadership team that I'm a member of. And as a member of that team, we were able to create an equity policy for the district that actually got approved and passed by the Board of Education that includes language in regards to recruitment and hiring of teachers of color, linguistically diverse teachers, and so on. So using that equity policy has really helped us push our initiative to really increase the numbers of teachers of color in our district. When it comes to various partnerships that we have, such as Relay and even other universities that we've been able to establish partnerships with, source of bringing in student teachers into our district, we've been able to use some of our funding creatively to help increase the recruitment of teachers of color. So, using some of our title funds, we applied for a grant through the state for the minority teacher recruitment grant, and making sure that we are being very strategic in how we're utilizing those funds to really help us increase the numbers of teachers of color in our district. We've also been able to use some of our funds to work collaboratively with a local organization called Bridge to Success to create a Black Educator affinity group in our district that we started this year, and we're hoping to expand it next year to create a Latinx affinity group, and further to create a LGBTQ plus affinity group as well. Each of those little pieces really came about because we had that equity policy at the forefront of everything. It really got our Board of Education to realize that the district has a specific plan as to what they want to do, as to what we want to do to make sure that we're increasing teachers of color in our district. So far, we've been doing pretty well. Right now, we're at 25% teachers of color that were hired this year. Although we are a very large district in Connecticut, so although it may seem like a good percentage of teachers of color hired, we still have a long way to go to really reach the numbers that we need. One thing that we want to make sure that we continue to do is to build those partnerships, bringing in the partnerships with the next gen having the educators rising brought in, making sure that we are sharing any of our postings or vacancies with, as Dr. Tucker mentioned before, with Black and Dallas in the state, to make sure that we're reaching as many people as possible to try to bring them into our district as future teachers for Waterbury Public Schools. But mainly, it's really just making sure that we have that oversight, having someone really monitor what we're doing, making sure that we're truly following the policy, the equity policy that we have in place, making sure that we're not going aside from what our goals are for the district. And it's going to be a goal that's going to be in place for years to come. It's not something that's going to be fixed overnight, and we all know that. But if we continue to expand our thinking about how we can increase teachers of colors into our district, and working together with other districts, as we've been doing with the state, with our coaching sessions, to make sure that we're really thinking of everything to make sure that we increase those numbers.
Thank you so much, Jessica. So at this time, even though we haven't yet heard from two of our panelists, we are going to be respectful of the schedule and begin our opportunity to take questions from the audience. So one of the questions that is in the chat is regarding policies and practices, that whether they are specifically tailored to diversify by race or by other demographics, gender, age, culture, in any of the districts.
So our district, as I mentioned before, with our equity policy, we're looking to increase the number of teachers racially, those that come from various cultures, but also linguistically. We have a large population of non-English speakers in our district here in Waterbury. We have a large number of Spanish-speaking families, Albanian-speaking families, and I believe the next one is Portuguese. So we are trying to broaden our horizon, not just with teachers of color, but just overall diversity for our district, for what our needs are for our students.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We're just trying to have a more diverse educator workforce, racially, ethnically, linguistically. There's not really a target as far as what that diversity is going to look like.
Yeah, I would agree as well. Our policies are not going to be that intricate level, but our equity committee, one of the goals that the equity committee will have is to really look at all of our policies from an equity lens and determine what makes sense for our district. So.
And the same would be for Groton as well. I just want to kind of go back to what Colin had stated earlier, and with centered around culture. One thing that we recognize in terms of the language that we are going to be utilizing is centered around recognizing unconscious bias and the impact that it has in the hiring and selection process. And so we are looking to add language that speaks to and helps us address that particular area. We have found that in the hiring practice, it's a common term of trying to find fit or cultural fit. Through our research that we've done, we like the term, we want to add to the culture, so cultural add. And so when we're talking about the practices that we're utilizing for hiring, what we're asking the participants, those who are involved in the interview process, we're asking them to recognize how does this individual truly benefit our population. So that's that cultural add component. And so we're looking to add language to our practices and policies that speak to that in Groton.
Thank you. I also see a question. What collaboration do you have with universities to reach out and prepare future diverse educators?
So I'll just jump in. I'm fortunate. I'm actually an adjunct faculty member for the University of Connecticut. I've been an adjunct faculty member for the University of St. Joseph. So I have a fairly decent network with colleges and universities, and I take any and all opportunities that I can to speak to students and teacher prep programs to talk about who we are and what we're trying to do here in South Windsor, and I'm very intentional about that. Somebody also mentioned in one of the questions that I'm seeing is what were the most critical elements that were needed from universities. One of the things that I will say is one of the things that I do every year is I actually go into one of the local universities and do a presentation for the students that are getting ready to graduate and go into looking for gainful employment. And a lot of the audiences, there's not much diversity in the audience, and I'm saying that this is a very specific example. I don't know what schools and universities have with regards to promoting and getting more students, diverse students admitted into teacher prep programs. But I'm not, in my very limited experience, and I'm not saying this from a critical way, I've not seen a lot of diversity from teacher prep programs that I have gone in and been a part of, and I think that that's something that would be beneficial as well.
Oh, I think in Torrington, the Ed Rising partnership that Dr. Tucker talked about, I think is going to be critical for us as we engage in more partnerships with the Ed Prep programs. I think so, working with districts to engage in those grow your own programs where we're, helping our students to find a pathway to education, but continuing that relationship throughout their college career with the ed programs, and moving that in so that they do come back and teach in our district after they finish their ed prep program. I think that's going to be critical for us in Torrington.
And also, if I could add to what everyone is saying, I think we also have to recognize that traditional pathways are just one way in which we can increase the pool. We also need to look at non-traditional pathways as well. But regardless, we want to build high retention support teacher pathways. One way to do that, I would encourage that districts begin to look at or identify partial scholarships and loan forgiveness opportunities to help subsidize or reimburse tuitions, because some of the individuals may also be from the populations, let's say from your non-certified staff, your paras, your coaches. Those individuals are great candidates to pursue a teaching preparation program, but may need some assistance financially to commit to that. So there are some, scholarships out there that I encourage you to research that you can share with those populations to provide them with some opportunities to pursue teaching. We've heard several of us speak about the teacher residency program. Connecticut has that. We work in Groton. We're working with CREC. It is at the elementary level at this current point, but those partnerships between districts and universities, again, are essential and help subsidize and improve teacher training, and again will help increase the talent pool. And then similar to Waterbury, we are participating, Groton that is participating in EdRising. And so we are also targeting the student population. And as Dr. Tucker stated, we recognize in Groton that we need to start even earlier than high school. We need to start with the middle school. And again, it's about changing the perspectives that people have with education, understanding what it actually pays, the benefits on it. A lot of, in speaking to a lot of potential or aspiring educators, or prior to that, they were not aware of what the pay was like, what the benefits were like. And so I think we as educators need to also go out and sell our profession.
Thank you, Jamal. So I know that there are questions that we didn't get to, and I apologize, but there's just not enough time for this critical discussion. But we appreciate you, panelists. We thank you for the opportunity to provide some information from Connecticut.
Hi, everyone. This is Sarah Barzi, and just want to, on behalf of my colleagues at the REL-NE and the Region 2 Comprehensive Center, want to thank everyone for joining us today. Thank Connecticut for the incredible work that they are doing to increase the diversity of the educator workforce. Many thanks to our presenters and our panelists, Drs. Warner, Tucker, and Kevin, as well as Dr. Hopkins, our moderator of our panel, and just so great to hear, being from Connecticut myself, great to hear the work that's happening in districts in Collin and South Windsor, and Kim in Torrington, Jamal in Groton, and Jessica in Waterbury. Many thanks for being here, and just a reminder, as I said at the top of the hours, your feedback is essential to our work and being able to be responsive to your needs and ensuring that these sessions are helpful for you. So we encourage you to please take a moment to take our survey